the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you call the roll.
Yes, Director Davidson?
Here.
Director Ratterman?
Here.
President Underhill?
Here.
Director Mills?
Present.
And Director Strange?
Here.
Item number 2, public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Public comment this morning. Seeing none, we'll go on to item number 3, the consent agenda. The following items are expected to be routine, non-controversial. Items will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member may request that any item be removed for later discussion. Item 3A, fiscal year 2014-15, the budget status report for February 2015.
Move for acceptance.
Moved by Jeff, second by Scott. Do you have a question?
I only have a comment, and that is that, as you know, I brought up in the Finance Committee a question regarding page 2, and it is yet to be answered, but we'll work with staff on that to get the answer we need.
Can everyone hear Dennis? Are you on? Yes.
We on?
All right. Call for the vote.
Yes, Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Ratterman?
Yes.
Director Mills?
Yes?
Director Strange?
Yes.
And Director Underhill?
Yes. Okay, we are going into, we're going to be doing some agenda rearrangement because Jeff Myers is not available. He's home ill, so he is on the phone. And we're going to be hearing items 7A and 7B first. At this point, I will,
Madam President, that's items 7B and
excuse me.
7C.
Excuse me, items 7B and 7C. And I'll turn it over to Dave Egerton, our general manager.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Today, we have a couple of very important agenda items for you. The first of which I'm going to be walking us through this presentation, and this is specific to projects that are within the district's capital replacement and renovation program. And this is for both water and wastewater projects. One of the things that we've been working on since the new board was seated in December and have made a high priority is to really reevaluate the projects that were in the list that we had. And of course, this is a list that was originally developed. It's in large part based on the capital improvement plan that was in place from early in this, from I believe it was 2012, I believe was the CIP. Projects were then brought forward and made part of the R&R program that was embraced with the rates that were imposed in 2013, the 3-year rate plan, series of rate increases over 3 years that were to take place. All of those rate increases have happened except for the last increment, which is scheduled to take place this September, unless this board takes action otherwise, which the question on what to do about the rates and whether there's an opportunity to make changes in that is coming at the next agenda item. And so we will get into that specifically. This item is really to speak to the projects themselves and why we recommend doing the ones that we have before you. Okay. Again, just an overview of the purpose of R&R. It's replacement and renovation or rehabilitation. These are repairs to our existing infrastructure or replacement of existing infrastructure that is basically lived to the full extent of its lifespan. Our infrastructure has an expected lifespan, just like the 3A line. And Ebbets Pass has it's a steel pipe, mortar line steel pipe that has a 50-year lifespan. It's gone beyond that. And so some of the projects are to address the fact that we do have infrastructure that is now, again, beyond its useful lifespan and naturally is expected to start to deteriorate and to fail as a result. As well, it is to deal with some of the issues on location of facilities, existing facilities, to be able to resolve some potential issues with public health, like example of a pipeline under Lake Tulloch for one of our collection sewer lines. So it's a host of different projects. We will get into the specific projects and the reasons why those projects were deemed to be important projects to move forward. The general things that we evaluated for were, one, continue to provide safe and reliable service for the district and our customers. That's always at the forefront of what we do. That's something that I know in the goal setting this board conducted a few months ago. That was a priority. Number one is that we operate successfully and provide a good service to our customers. We also want to make sure we're meeting our state and federal regulatory requirements, just like operation of our water and wastewater systems have a number of different permit requirements under state and federal law, Clean Water Act requirements, so a number of different things that we have to stay in compliance with. And so the functionality of our infrastructure and its ability to meet the intended purpose for which it was initially placed in the ground, we've got to make sure that we're continuing to do that so that we are not in effect in violation and then could be subject to substantial penalties and fines by the regulatory agencies themselves if we were to have a failure in the system, or just because we are no longer in compliance and meeting just like water quality requirements on the quality of the water that leaves our treatment facilities. Because, well, we also weighed the potential exposure to liability, again, the penalties, so again, it's really a risk management type perspective. One of the things I recall when I first came to the district and we did the presentation at West Point, and we were trying to give some background on why we would even have an R&R program in the first place. And one of the things, and I know Jeff gave that initial presentation, and one of the things we talked about was, your options are, you do some of the preventative things up front, some of the replacements before you're actually in a state of a failure of these facilities, so that you don't have to be in an emergency response mode. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to balance the fact that, we only want to do these projects as necessary. We recognize we've got, there are implications, there are serious implications on our budget and rates and a number of different things. So we really only want to bring forward those things that we absolutely need to get done. Because again, if we're in a position of doing those projects simply as emergency response, we lose our options in managing those projects and doing them more cost effectively. I worked on a project in El Dorado County when I was at El Dorado Irrigation District, and it was actually a Tech-Eye transmission line on a water line, and it started to have repeated failures of the line with massive blowouts under high pressure. And we were in a position we had to go to an emergency declaration of emergency for the project and do it as an emergency design build project. And so we lost a lot of the options and flexibility we would have had to be able to stage it in a way and bid it in a way that we could have maximized the cost control on it. We were basically in a point where every time it would blow out, we were putting the community at risk of serious injury, and we were also incurring liability under the state regulatory agencies, Fish and Wildlife agencies, for impacts to the environment. So it was in a position, and that's what we're trying to avoid in a program that they're presenting today. Again, so when we went back and we evaluated the projects, we really wanted to look at the necessity of these. And I know this seems so basic, but it really is. I think it was critically important, and I know that's important to this board. When we present these projects to the public, and we move forward with them and we spend the public's money on these projects, we really have to be able to say these are necessary projects. There's no fluff in this. These are ones that we really have to do to meet those objectives that we talked about before. As well, we wanted to really evaluate the timeline for performing these projects, and also looking at what are the budget issues involved with this, and the capacity, internal capacity with our staff and our resources to perform these projects. So it's kind of this true up, this reality check. A lot of these, we have to be realistic, and this is something the board said, we got to be realistic about the resources that we have here. We have very dedicated, talented staff, but we only have so many staff. I mean, right now we're operating with an engineering department of one engineer. We've had the great fortune of having a utilities director who's also an engineer, but that's going to change in time. And so how can we realistically get the work done so we're not incorporating a lot of things into the plan that may sound important, may in fact be important projects, but we realistically could not accomplish those within the time frame that we said we would want to, because we don't have the staff to do it. And again, I think that's a really important point I want to make, is that we really do want to maximize our staff's participation in these projects, the management of these projects. I, for one, am not comfortable turning over a project and to a consultant and saying, you run with it and we'll come back and see you at the end and see how it went. I don't think that's in the interest of our ratepayers and meeting our mission to operate that way. I don't have a pacemaker on this.
Not yet.
Not yet.
So the board's direction was that would, it was strong direction. One, do that vetting of the projects for all the things that we talked about. That this was a critically important thing to do and it needed to happen as soon as possible. Two, was to really look at I'm gonna turn that off and just speak loudly. The other thing is what can we do? Obviously we've gone through a series of very substantial rate increases. There's been a strong reaction from the community. Understandably, this it impacts every person that receives service from us, and the charges that they receive. And so there was a strong direction from the board that we had to go back and find ways that we could give the board some opportunities, if it was possible, to be able to make adjustments to those rates, to provide some relief to our customers. And again, this is a balancing act, and I know this is why this is an important issue before the board today, to weigh that the risk and the ability to continue to deliver safe, reliable service and meet our legal requirements, but at the same time trying to find some ways to provide relief to our ratepayers, and I've heard that loud and clear, and staff has as well. So we've spent a lot of time on this to bring the recommendation to you today. We met with staff to begin this process. We sat down with engineering, utilities, and finance to really evaluate these projects, again, along the same considerations, not to reiterate all the things that I've just said before, but a couple of the other things that we also looked at in addition to the other things that I've had mentioned, is really what are the opportunities for grant funding. We've had a very strong record of success on grants and other funding sources from the state and federal government. And what can we do? What can we expect to succeed on these with these projects? And so some of the things that are presented to you today in this list of projects have an explanation that we expect that we will intend to apply for grant funds on those projects. We expect to be successful in that. And whether we are or not, obviously we don't get to make the final call on that, but based on our past success, we do expect to again have access to those funds. But if in fact we aren't, then we're going to have to reevaluate the timing and of when we perform those projects. And so some of the things we'll talk about as we go through those, and Charles is here to answer any questions about the specific projects as our district engineer. But that's really important to note. When we identify grant funds on there, if we don't receive those funds on some of these projects, we may go back and of course that would be something we would talk to the board about. But we may make a recommendation that we hold off on that project and try to seek funds, outside funds in the future. We also really looked at any opportunities to phase or delay projects or to reconfigure the projects. And this was really where Bill Purley Utilities was extremely helpful. On the ground, what can we do to continue to meet our permit requirements, also anticipating, especially on the wastewater permits, and changes that may be imposed upon us in time, but how do we continue how can we do that in the most cost-effective way so that we're not doing projects ahead of time? We're going to be responsive, we're going to be timely in our projects, but we're not going to do them years ahead and incur additional costs that we can wait on. So that was an important component of the analysis. We shared the results of this and worked with the board and its committees through the engineering committee, in particular on the project list, and that was the February and March meetings. We reviewed the list of the projects, both on the water and wastewater side. This list that we prepared was a 3-year list. In time, I would like to have a list over a longer time frame, 5 to 10 years. But to begin with now, we thought that it was probably most important that we really focus on the next 3 years. That's the time frame within that was initially anticipated within the R&R program as it was established in 2013 with the rate increases. So it was a logical time period. I want to be absolutely clear, though, this what we're presenting today is our best estimate of what we need to do now and into the coming 2 years to be able to meet the needs of the district. But that list will be continuously reevaluated. And as I said, as things change with access to grant funding, or if we have unexpected events that, there could be other infrastructure that we don't know that there's a problem out there until it actually occurs and we have to respond to it. Those kind of things, if and when those do happen, we will come back to the board. We will not sit back and just rely on a plan that has now been rendered to be somewhat, because the facts on the ground are different than what we're discussing today. That would come back to the board. At the earliest opportunity, we would want to get direction and make sure that we're on the same page. Because that's really, to me, is what's most important about this, is that the board has comfort in the projects we're doing, and there are no surprises. You would know at any given time what we're working on because you could look at the project list that we presented to you. And so that's how we're going to operate. We're also going to come back next year with an update to this list. Again, we want to keep this thing fresh, particularly going into each budget year, so we would update it again. We may try to extend its time frame, but again, that would be a chance to revisit it, and if there's projects that can be moved out or can be phased, or now we have grant funds that we didn't see before, maybe under Prop 1, we want to make adjustments accordingly. Again, that may provide the opportunity in the future for the board to do additional things as far as rate relief if it decides to do so. That'll be one of the things that we certainly keep in the foremost of our mind as we create that list, as we update the list again into next year. As well, we met at the March Finance Committee meeting to really look at the financial side of this. What is the cash flow needed to fund the projects that we're discussing, that I'm about to get into, and really, what are and some of the things that you'll see here are some of the options that would be available to do some reduction or suspension of rates for the program, and how would that affect the cash flow and our ability to get that work done. And again, it's trying to balance again the meeting the mission of the district, recognizing if we don't do some of these things, the consequences financially, liability-wise, are not a place that we would recommend as staff going for the board or the district or the investment of our resources. So that's the perspective we've come into this with. This is all in your board materials. I apologize for the small print. This is on the chart, and let me grab my... You'll see that this just is the same chart that's in the board materials, the attachment to the agenda report. This is the chart that we presented to the engineering committee and showing how we evaluated the projects. And again, Charles is here to speak specifically to these. But you can see we've ranked them by priority, and a lot of that is kind of is a judgment call, but certainly they're. We've identified the reasons that we think that these projects are time sensitive and most important. There are considerations like not only cost, but access to grant funds. And you'll see on the wastewater project list, and after this I'll show you the water project list as well. We've identified where we actually have grant funding secured. where we're getting close to having that secured, such as in the 3A line, which we fully expect to, and are almost at the end of that process. And then as well, those that we intend to apply for, like the Sheep Ranch project on the water side. And again, if we don't receive those funds, that will change our evaluation on the timing of those projects. As well, we looked at, we've identified some of the age issues on the age of the infrastructure. Again, these assets in the ground have expected lifespan that we want to be cognizant of. Also, any maintenance issues that we have with some of these projects. Again, performance issues as well on top of that, and hazard mitigation. And this is really key on the sewer side, because again, the last place I ever want to go with our operations is to be in a position where we have an inadequate infrastructure that puts us at risk, greater unreasonable risk of sewer spills. That's not good for our community, it's not good for our economy, and it's certainly not good for us financially with the consequences of fines and penalties. Also looking at the customers that are served by this, I know that's one of the things that the board has said, how many customers are served by this infrastructure. I mean, that's got to be one of the thought considerations. Some of these projects are more isolated to a specific subset of the community, so it's a smaller group, whereas others have wider application. And then again, we've got some comments at the end. As you can see, this is the entire list right here, the wastewater projects. So we have 6 projects that we've identified. And I want to note that some of these projects these are projects that would be either finished or started to some extent within the 3-year period. So some of the projects like Lift Station 22, that project has already been bid. We have a contractor that's about to begin construction of that project. Certainly that one will be completed within well before the 3-year time frame. We have other projects that would actually include earlier stages of the project within the 3-year time frame, such as the design or the permitting for the project. We want to try to stage things, the progress on these projects in a way that is most economical and really is best use of our staff resources as well. Again, and that's kind of the flip side, or the preferred alternative to being in a position like I explained with where we were with the EID and having to jam everything through very quickly with an emergency project. We want to be thoughtful, deliberate, and we want to be systematic in our implementation of this to the extent we can, so that we can maximize. I mean, just for example, if we had the opportunity, we can take the opportunity on a project to really spend a little more time on the design phase. We can also incorporate opportunities to do things like value engineering. We have a chance to go back and look at some of these projects and say, what are the potential, the constructability issues do we anticipate? Are there any kind of problems that we may not see that we could encounter if we pursue this design for the project in the manner that we have selected? Or are there opportunities to make changes to it, even some what may seem very modest changes, but those could actually save us time, prevent potential conflicts, and save us money. So being able to have the opportunity to do that, and that's what we're trying to do with the staging, is something that I think in the end can save us money and time on these projects. I'll just stop here if the board has any questions on these projects. I know a number of these are ones that we've already spoken about before. Things like the lift station project. Again, we've got an old facility that is underpowered, and that then that's that being downstream of Tulloch. If that facility is not functioning properly, we really put ourselves at risk of having a sewer overflow that could impact the lake, which of course is we well know, we got an agenda item on that, is a source water supply for our community. As well, we've got some other projects. We've got lift station renovations. There are a number of issues there on electrical issues, corrosion, mechanical, things like that these are not uncommon. This is to be expected. But these projects are a little more than you would see with typical O&M that we would do on an annual basis. Certainly we continue to do that, but some of these facilities are in need of a larger capital infrastructure projects to make sure that they continue to perform properly. I want to note on the Arnold wastewater treatment plant, that was one that we were able to, again, I really thank Bill for his work on that one. That was one that the initial, we were initially looking at a project, I think it was close to $1 million, as I recall. We looked at some of the things, opportunities we had to really rescope that and try to achieve some additional savings on it. So what you see is actually something that is meets our requirements, but then keeps the cost down and delays some of the additional project elements that may or may not be required in time due to what happens with the permit. But if you'd like to answer any, or I'd be happy to have Charles come up and speak to the projects.
What's that?
Questions?
Well, I mean, I've got just an observation. I really wish that because I know there are many other projects. And while we're looking at this 3-year model, we're not, it doesn't seem like we're taking anything into consideration about where we're gonna come up with the money to fund the future projects. So, I mean, how do we, it's nice to say we're gonna plan for 3 years, but, this district has to last forever. And so I'm a little troubled that we're in such a hurry to do this, that we don't have the time to plan out a little bit farther and make sure that we're not gonna leave the district insolvent.
Yes, and that's a key consideration. I mean, that's one that we ultimately, I think that we felt like, we really, the most important thing was that we identified what were the priorities in the near term to make sure that we.
And I appreciate that, and through the engineering committee and stuff, I think, we had lots of discussion about, the absolute projects that we had to do, but ultimately, I mean, we were criticized significantly for, wrongly, I think, during the last rate hearing, but we were criticized for not putting enough money away for R&R, and then having to do it all at once. And so, are we just recreating that? And I understand the reason that we didn't. We've had 5 years of drought. We had 15% of our customers moved away, that weren't paying their bills due to foreclosure. I mean, we had significant, financial downturn, and we weren't able to put as much money away, and we still backfilled that with, a very successful grant program. We did a lot of stuff, but we're going to get criticized again if we're not putting the money away, and we have to come back in 3 or 4 years and redo this again. So, I mean, I'm just leaving it out there. I mean, I'm not, trying to tip my hand one way or another what I want to do here, but I just think that, let's be realistic about it. I mean, are we going to sacrifice our financial future to make everybody feel better for a short term? Let's just tell the truth.
Well, to address Director Davidson's concerns, just quickly, I know we have some charts that we're going to be looking at here, but just to get the answer right now, what is the money in the wastewater side, which I know is our biggest problem, or where we have less funding going into the R&R program, but at the end of this 3 years that we're studying right here, what will be, and also, we also got to realize that once we've created, that we did already have created a funding mechanism that will go well into the future. There will be funds going into the R&R program well after this, for the next 5, 10 years, there'll be all of these funds that for these first 2 rate increases will go in there. But my question is, at the end of this 3-year study, what is the tub of money? What is the amount of the money that will be left in that to do those future projects that are yet to be identified?
Are we off target a little bit and we're talking about the next agenda item? Or
Well, that's
am I missing the?
Well, that's my point is, I just wish that this was farther out, so because, I mean, seriously, a 3-year plan, and we're not going to think about what we have to do for the next 3 years. So, I mean, and I know that there are some other projects that we could be adding on there, at least so we have, I mean, we can say, okay, well, these are 4 possible projects, and here's their cost, and they would likely be done in year 4, 5, and 6, or something like that. I mean, I personally want to have that information before I go and, get too carried away here. And I'm sure we have an estimate that somebody could throw at us, and, I mean, the projects aren't secret. They've, we've kicked a lot of projects off this list. I mean, I'm sure we still have that information. you know.
And the question I had is germane to this particular topic. We're talking about a 3-year study and putting funds together, and my question is, how much money would be left at the end of, with the study that we just have completed? What would be the money that's in that? And I realize that it will continue to be funded.
Let's talk about that. I think there's negative.
Yeah, I know that there's an answer in here, but I just want to make it.
Yeah, Madam President, if I could add, and Director Bradman and Davidson, that issue is, I think Director Strange noted, it actually is on the agenda for the next item. And I know this is a tough one to take because it's all intertwined with the financial aspects of this project, and it's hard to say, we're just going to look at projects on this agenda item, and now we're going to go to the financial side of it when it is so interconnected. But what we're going to show you in the next item is that we're bringing to you a project list that provides flexibility to the board to make some reductions in rates, but in a way that can continue to get this work done and not defund the project balance at the end of year 3. That is something that we've definitely thought about, because what our concern is, certainly there are going to be other projects. We've evaluated a bunch of other projects as well that we've said, we've either delayed, in whole or in part, or pushed out off this chart into the future. Charles can speak to some of those. But we know that we are going to need some available continuing funding for this program, so we don't have to be in an emergency response mode again, and we can get ahead of these things. So that's what we'll show in the next item, is that we're trying to create a path so that there is some funding at the end of year 3.
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve an updated 3-year water and wastewater capital replacement.
I've got some questions.
That's fine. I just
For that, but.
wanted to make a motion, that's all.
Excuse me, your motion again?
To approve the updated 3-year water and wastewater capital replacement renovation, capital R&R program.
Got that, Mona?
I'll second that motion.
I'd like to have further discussion
Oh,
here.
certainly, yes, yes.
What happens?
Yeah, every director is, I'm sure, going to have their own concepts and ideas of what is important and what is not. And having watched the district since going back to 78 and 77, et cetera, and the issues, for instance, in Copper Cove with the sewage issues and the spills, et cetera, some of these things have been going on for 35, 40 years. They're not new. And although I'm glad to see the district is now taking some steps to correct those long-standing issues, I really am quite disheartened that the previous boards didn't, in essence, do their part to take care of this a long time ago, back when they had the $19.2 million of North Fork money and all of the other funds that have slipped through our fingers over the years. So it's just a point that I think that it's important to have this discussion now, because when we go into a budgetary process for next year, it then is going to be included. And how we include funding for additional projects that we may need is going to have to be part of that discussion. So this is a very timely point to put this particular agenda item in the discussion, so that we know where we're going to be when we start developing our budget for next year.
Director Strange?
Thank you. Two things come to mind. One is the grant funding, which obviously, chicken before the egg, but at the same time, I think it would be good to develop a strategy that if grant funds come available for different projects, then what are we able to do with some of those monies that we had dedicated to that project that we no longer need to use for that project, and where those funds might go. The other thing for me is the immediacy of this drought and Prop 1, and as I look at these projects that are on here, and I know you've talked a little bit about being able to pull additional projects that might best fit grant fund opportunities, but the Prop 1 and the issue of drought relief, there are a couple water projects on here that I see that could be, especially the mill pond, for additional storage. But what I'd like to see, not necessarily prioritized over these projects, but certainly a list of projects that could be shovel ready as these other grant funds are available, that who knows when those funds will be available ever again in the future. I think that enhancing our list of projects by including, the Prop 1 money opportunities, obviously, that's going to require staff time and additional costs for us to be able to respond to those potential large amounts of money that are out there and are available on a very, one-time kind of a deal. And so I'd like to see how that philosophy and those projects, as they're developed, might fit into, this same type of a program, because again, they're gonna require costs. Where do we get those monies from?
Okay. Let's bring it back to the wastewater sheet, because I wanted to make a comment, because I was part of the engineering committee where we looked at the projects that were top priority, and I think we kind of went away from that, because these are the projects that we did identify, that we are priority, have to be completed. But as Dave is saying, we will be looking at this on a continual basis, so it's not that we've come up with this project and that's it.
Yeah, I think we need to be clear about our contribution to the effort here, because, you and I are not engineers, and we basically discuss this with staff, and these are staff's recommendations.
Right.
We tried to vet the differing issues out, and that's really all we did, so I don't want to try to take credit for coming
Oh,
up
well,
with this list.
no.
I know that's not what you're trying to do, but I just don't want to, I don't want people to misunderstand what our expertise is up here.
And you really made us do our job, and we looked at these a number of different times and from different vantage points within the organization, different expertise areas, and I think what you see is our best recommendation for what we really do need to do. Particularly, what's going to be most concern is what do we do this year? What are we really putting our time into? There is a host of other projects, though. I think Director Davidson, like you said, that and I think this really goes to Director Strange's point. I think we need to catalog what those other projects are. And part of that can be that we're starting to build out a longer-term plan that includes those out years projects, and also may include projects that may become more attractive given what happens with Prop 1. If we see, because obviously we want to gain access to the funds to do important projects, and there's a lot of dynamics that we have yet to see how they're going to play out within each. DWR hasn't even prepared its solicitation guidelines yet, so we don't even know what they're going to be considering the highest priority projects for funding. And as well, we haven't worked through our local RWMs to determine what projects are the best fit within the suite of projects that need to move forward. So we may be in a position where we may have other members of an RWM saying, we would really like to see you bring forward this project because it helps us check this box that otherwise we don't have a project to fit that. What I'd like to do is go ahead and have a catalog of all those kind of projects, and if the opportunity arises, I'm gonna want to come back to you, and because if it's something that we're not saying right now, this is something we're going to be investing our time and money on, but there's an opportunity that comes about, I want to come to you as soon as we can and make sure that is something that we should now be elevating on the list. So really, this list is going to be a living thing,
Yeah. I had a question on you said regulatory issues, and I understand permits and permit update and the TSOs, where you say that the Regional Water Quality Control Board is involved in items number 3 and 4. Are we working with them for permitting, or just how are they involved?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Charles, maybe you can come up and speak to that. I think probably that, one of the good examples of that we've got an agenda item today on is the West Point Wilseyville consolidation for the wastewater plants. And we're not in violation of our permits. We're just trying to get ahead of the next iteration of the requirements of the permits. And so we're trying to do a project that, yes, it requires an expenditure today, but in fact, it actually has a continuing savings because we can eliminate an unnecessary permit for one of the facilities, and we're just creating a more efficient way to get the job done to deliver service. But, yeah, you want to just add on that?
It's not that we're currently in violation or that it's just preemptive action to mitigate the possibility of a spill, because the fines for spills are very high, and unless you can prove to the board that we had a spill down in near the La Quintana Golf Course a few months back. Bill and the crew went into the creek. They were able to contain it. The creek was dry, fortunately. But if the creek wasn't dry, and it would have been a massive fine. So, I mean, there's a lot of liability and to our ratepayers where there's a possibility of a spill. So, at this point, the regional board is not involved in those items that you mentioned, but it's just making sure we
In
protect our
anticipation,
customers.
right,
Yeah.
right. Thank you.
Dave, if I heard you right, this R&R project list on the wastewater side and the funding for it is, we're banking on getting grants. We're assuming that we will get grants, and if we don't, we'll go back to the drawing board.
On some specific projects, yes, like the West Point Woolseyville Consolidation Project. The analysis that we did to come up with a recommended project, which is what the environmental document will be on the subject of today, that was grant funded, that effort, $200,000 for the study. Now we have grant funding that we're receiving for the actual project itself, for implementation of the project to consolidate. That really on the wastewater, there's not quite as much that's available on the wastewater side. There's some of the considerations are, some of the issues that we want to address are in areas that aren't as, it's not as easy to access grant funds. Some of the, depending on median income of some of the areas, makes grants more available. West Point Woolseyville was one of those that made that attractive option. I think that's more, the question really is probably more specific to some of the water projects. If I can go to that real quick. You'll see we've got some of those grants in hand or on the way to being in hand on Big Trees, Redwood Tanks, and the 3A project. But we've also got some others that, like Sheep Ranch and the Blagan Mill Pond restoration, that we will be applying for grants for. And, we think we've got a very strong probability of success. Again, if we don't get those grants, we're not going to just follow the project list because it's on the list. We're going to step back and say, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean we need to hold off on this project? Do we need to do it differently? Do we need to, look for a different outside funding source to help with the project? But yes, that's going to be, that would give us, we would stop and take a look at it, and again, if it's, I want to have a continuing dialogue with the board, so I would expect that if it's a project, we expect it to get fully grant funded. If something changes and we would have to put all rate revenue to make that happen, that's a decision that I want input from the board on. I don't want to surprise anybody by that.
Yeah, the West Point project is on the list because it is grant funded. So if that were to go away, then we'd have to come up with another solution for it. Well, I'd still like, I wish there was another page to the project list that did include some of the things that Terry's talking about, and even some of the ones that we're gonna have to fund, because I think it's more important that we recognize what we're gonna have to fund 4, 5, 6 years from now. I realize you can't plan out too far and be very accurate, but we know that, just with the simple age of our pipes in the ground, and we should have a prepare to replace list, that goes out, 50 years. We have tanks that we built in 2008 that one day will have to be replaced, and we should have that summary of our infrastructure like that, with a general lifespan, and always know about it. Because you tend to forget. They're in the ground, you can't see them, but they wear out, and there's no district that I'm aware of that's collected enough money to replace all their infrastructure. If somebody could tell me which one is, I would be very interested in that. But I think if our list was a little longer, we could make a better decision on the next agenda item,
Okay.
you know.
Okay, and-
Director,
Dave, I'm in agreement here with the point, and that is if we look at every piece of our infrastructure so that we can start putting into our budgets yearly a certain amount of set aside, so we're not in this position 20 or 30 years from now, that we've already got the money starting to be set aside based upon how the aging of the infrastructure looks. So a complete list, maybe somewhere in the near future after the budget process, so we can see all of it and its age and what is it going to be the proposed expense. Not that it's going to be accurate, but some idea so that we can start putting that figure in our budget.
There was one thing in here that did have our infrastructure in the dates
Some of it is there.
constructed.
Yeah, some of it's
Some of
there.
it. And that's the kind of thing I'm, yeah, it was the
Yeah.
tanks, I guess.
Yeah, it's the tanks.
And that, I think that would be great information. What I would like to do, if the board is in agreement, is to work with our committees to develop that additional series of pages to really include that within what the future projects necessary for R&R. I think that would be helpful, and then we can come back and incorporate that into the plan as well.
I assume the staff's looked at liners for those tanks as an option maybe to the sandblasting and all the other treatment kind of stuff.
It is a possibility. It's not typical. I mean, essentially your epoxy coating is your lining, but I mean, that's more like in some cases, I guess, where we have a tank that's just beyond fixing and we're just kind of looking for a temporary solution, that might be a temporary solution. I can think, like Sheet Branch, that tank's getting pretty far gone, so that might be something to hold us over for, 5 years or so, until we can get in there and come up with a more permanent solution. But they do make the liners, yes.
Yeah, in fact, I just happened to run across somebody that does that internationally. I mean, that's their job. And I was like, oh, hey, interesting. But I just don't know the economics of that and what the costs are and whether it's a cost savings or not.
It'd be preferable if we could just do the maintenance that we need to do on a timely basis and just avoid having to consider those kind of solutions. And that would be the, and anyway, so.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So I would just add that I really appreciate that direction on really making a more exhaustive list that really does look at future years and gives us the flexibility to identify projects now that something may happen that might make us want to move those up, and I want those to be right in front of us so that it's not a surprise to the board or the public or anyone can say, look, this is something we've identified for a long time. So what I would suggest is in the recommendation to approve the updated project list, to also provide direction to us to also build upon this to add those additional layers of the additional years of projects, at least going out, and I don't, picking the time frame. I mean, we'll work with the committee to come up with whether it's 5, 10 years or more to be able to provide that.
Well, we had made a commitment to pay off that loan within 7 years, so I think it'd be great to at least start there.
Okay.
Try to fulfill that commitment.
Okay.
do I have any other discussion? Okay. So I have.
Do we need to make an amendment to give you direction, or?
No, I mean, I think just the direction. I mean, this is the 3-year plan itself, but I think what we're talking about is basically this is additional information that will be brought into this and have as, it's not necessary to take the action today, but I think it's going to make this list that you're considering even stronger, because you can see the context of all the other things that we need to do in the future as part of that, so.
So are we going to have a change? Because if you say.
I'm not requesting one. I think
Oh,
with the
okay.
motion is
All right.
fine, and I understand the
No, it's
direction.
just
we're working.
accepting
Yeah.
these as a,
Yeah. Any further board discussion? Okay, then I ask for public comment.
Hi, Peter, ladies and gentlemen. Just a quick question. Great if you got money to put aside, for future needs. I agree with you. But if you have to compare, you have a few liabilities, financial liabilities. And instead of saving money and you have those, take care of those liabilities, wouldn't it be financially more feasible to eliminate some of those liabilities you have that you're paying interest on a little faster? Get out of the hole. I mean, just looking, hey, I got $1 here. I can put it in a bank, earn 1%, and I got a credit card that I'm paying that's cost me 10% liability. Which one do I want to take care of first? Yes, you should save money for future things coming up. But if you throw it aside, while you're paying up through the you-know-what, interest rates and your liabilities, are you really ahead? Let's take care of the outstanding liabilities you have. If you're counting on those, I don't know how much money folks, CCWD got from Prop 84. I mean, I know you applied, Board of Supervisors applied, cost you about $27,000 of, at the Tuolumne watershed you gave to the water district over there. 13 from you, 13 from the Board of Supervisors, 7-something, 8 from Tuolumne Hill to do a study. Got nothing for it. That was to see if you can get some money from 84. Well, that was money down the drain. So I don't know how much money you folks are gonna get from the state or the feds. We can have fantasies about it, okay? Because they're not exactly been straight and honest with you. And I'm talking about from the state level. And you have experience along that line. They wiggle something in front of you, but doesn't mean they're gonna come across. It would be nice to think about, let's get outstanding liabilities taken care of. So you have money to save up for the future. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, I'm close public comment and then roll call, vote.
Yes, Director Strange,
Yes.
Director Mills,
Yes.
Director Ratterman,
Yes.
Director Davidson,
Yes.
and Director Underhill.
Yes. Okay, 5-0 vote. Thank you. Now, we're ready for item 7C. 7C.
Okay. Madam President, members of the board, this agenda item is to consider the funding options for the R&R project list, and I wanted to note that we do have our financial officer and Director of Administrative Services, Jeff Meyer, on the phone, and he's under the weather today, but I want to thank him for being able to participate by phone. I'll walk us through the PowerPoint that Jeff prepared, but he's the expert on this, and any questions that you may have, he's certainly able to answer those. He'll jump in. Jeff, you hearing us okay there?
Yes, I do. Good morning, Madam President, members of the board, and I do apologize for not being there in person this morning.
Thank you, Jeff.
So this is part of, and as I mentioned in the last agenda item, one of the really, things that we have heard with a real strong desire by this board for staff to do its homework on what can we do in the way of providing some kind of rate relief under the R&R program. We know, especially with the new board majority coming in December, that was one of the things that I heard, and certainly I don't have the past history, but just what I heard in coming in December was that this had to be something that we made a priority. So in tandem with developing that recommended list of projects, we also evaluated how do we finance those projects, and is there any opportunity that we could provide some relief to our ratepayers in that process. What we'll look at today is to a number of options, and basically these are four that you see here. One would be to proceed with the rate increases that have already taken place, and then the additional rate increase that would happen, which would happen in September of this year. The second option, option B, would be to actually suspend that rate increase, leave the rate increases in place that have occurred to date, but to suspend that one that's coming September 1. Option C would be to suspend the first rate increase plus put reduce the rates across the board for water and wastewater for the R&R project by $5. This is one that Director Strange wanted us to evaluate, and so we've done that in this, and that's one of the options you'll see. And lastly, this is one that President Underhill asked us to look at is, instead, what if you had a suspension of rates plus a 10% reduction in the R&R rates for water and wastewater? That equates to, if we reduce it 10%, that would be approximately $5.68 per month reduction for a 5/8-inch meter. On the water side and wastewater, it would be $8.62 for the standard residential rate. Option A, the proposed monthly rate. This is looking at, this is if we do have the rate increase that goes into effect. And Jeff, feel free to step in here if you'd like to, but this is option A. We're looking at the what would happen if no action is taken. Essentially, option A would be the board doesn't do anything in addition to what's already happened, because this rate increase would happen without any further action of the board. It only takes an action to do something to stop this from going into place. But what we're looking at is a Jeff, maybe you want to speak to this one?
Certainly. Can you hear me on speakerphone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Board members, Dave is correct. The $90 per month is if we go ahead with the September 1st rate increase. Of this amount, $67.50, that's the monthly rate that goes towards the O&M. That was the prior sewer rate before we had this 5-year increase. And of that $90, $22.50 would go towards the R&R program. So if you look at the chart there, the revenue projections, and this is after payment of debt service, at the end of fiscal year 17-18, we would have about $3.8 million funds available if we go ahead with the rate increase.
Now, is that to do the projects with, or is that after the projects are done?
This is just before the projects are done. This is the amount of money you will have just from the rates. And that's what I thought I'd go through, is just kind of look at where the revenues are, and then we'll go ahead and look at where we are once we do the projects.
All right.
Okay, so moving on to the next slide. Option B, this would be the suspending of the rate increase that would take place September 1. So you can see there would be a reduction in the monthly rate from the $90 to $86.16. As Jeff had mentioned on the breakdown of that on the prior slide, O&M is $67.50, and the capital R&R would be $18.66. Here you're seeing the comparison of the rate increase, or excuse me, what the rate revenue would be with the increase in the yellow column, and then in the green column is with if the 9/1/15 increase is suspended, and you can see there's a difference there at the end of fiscal year 17-18 that would total $631,845 of revenue not received with the suspension of the rate in September. Jeff, do you have anything you want to add on that one?
Not at this point. Other than just to make sure that everybody understands that this is after we pay the debt service on the sewer loan.
Okay, option.
I'm sorry, Dave. That obligation has to be paid before we can use the revenues for any other projects.
Option C, we've got the suspension of the September 1 rate increase and a $5 reduction for water and wastewater. This is on the wastewater side. As you can see, that would take it to $81.16. And you know, that's reflected in the reduction of the capital R&R charge, the wastewater rate. our revenue would go from the $600,000 neighborhood of reduced revenue to over 1.5 million in that time period through fiscal year 17-18. Option D, this is to, instead of a $5 across the board, the 10% decrease. And as you can see, that would be approximately an $8.62 reduction in the capital and R&R charge. So we'd take it down to $10.04. And that reduces revenues by over 1.9 million, included, and with the suspension of the September 1 rate increase as well. Looking at Jeff, I moved on to the next slide on the capital R&R projects on wastewater. This is just a kind of summation of the projects that were identified before. And you can see all of those here. This is in fact where the revenue would be going as of today, as of what we would be, our work plan would be under the updated R&R program. And here's our 3-year capital R&R program funding chart or expenditure chart that was presented to the engineering committee. And as you can see with these projects and the estimates we have on the costs, and of course, these are just estimates, and certainly, we hope to come under those estimates, but there could be, depending on where bids come in, we'll see. But of course, the board will be informed of that and fully aware of what's happening. But you can see that we've got we're expecting to expend, as you can see this year, we've got projects through the end of this fiscal year that total $905,000, 1.65 million next year, 575,000 a year after, and 1.45 million the year after that to complete these projects, and in the phases that we have them shown here. On the wastewater cash flow side of it, this is the, Jeff, maybe you want to speak to this one. This is the wastewater cash flow option A chart.
Sure. If you look at the column entitled Cash After Debt Service, this is the same information that was provided to you on the previous slide. So this is, if there is a September 1 rate increase, the cash after debt service will be approximately $3.8 million. Adding to that the $2.3 million loan, there are no grants as of this time because we did not include the West Point Wilseyville project within this project list. The project costs are $4,580,000, which comes from the previous slide. So if you add up the cash after debt service, the loan, subtract out the project costs, you come up with a cash balance of $1,513,985. And remember, this is option A if you proceed with the September 1 rate increase. The next 3 slides are going to show the cash balance on options B, C, and D. B, suspend the rate increase. C, suspend the rate increase plus a $5 per month decrease. And D, suspend the rate increase with a 10% per month decrease. The information in the first 4 columns, the cash after debt service obviously will change because of the difference in revenues. The loan amount won't change, the grant amount won't change, and the project cost won't change. So you'll be looking at column 2 and the last column cash balance to see the difference between the 4 different options.
And Jeff, this is including 5 of the 6 priorities from the previous item, but not including the West Point Wilseyville. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And that, actually in hindsight, I think we probably should have included it here just to make sure. I don't want anybody to think that it's because it's not on this list for this item, it's not within the work plan. It's strictly this is on the cash flow, and because it's grant funded, it's in a different place than the other ones. But we probably should have kept it there just for consistency's sake.
I think there's 6, at least I'm seeing 6.
Yeah, this is 5 of the 6, is what I said.
The one thing I'd like to note, and this really goes to Director Davidson's question about where are we after 3 years, depending on what happens with the rates. And as you can see, if we, if the board, okay, so if we go back to option A, with not doing anything and let all of the rate increases that were adopted go into effect, we would end, after 3 years, we would still have a cash balance of 1.5 million.
And so that's debt service and project costs.
Jeff, I thought this was after debt service, is that correct?
That is after debt service, that is correct.
So this is actual money that we can use for infrastructure projects, shovel projects?
Right, it includes the debt service and the
Oh,
project.
yes,
and the
I'm sorry,
project.
yeah, it would already, yeah, be after debt service, you bet.
And so that answers my question as well, I think, that would be the pot of money, 1.5 million would be left if we didn't do anything with the rates.
No,
Or
that's if you proceed with the September 1st.
that's, if we didn't do anything
Right, if we
today
don't
with
do
the
it,
rates.
yes.
They proceeded with the third increase, incremental increase, that 1.5 would be in the bucket at the end of this 3 years for any future projects.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question. We have some bond maturation, or whatever that term is, coming in 17. Is that taken into consideration, Jeff?
Actually, we converted those bonds into a loan, and we do have, that loan does mature in September 1st of 2017. About 2/3 of the loan is being paid for by the expansion funds. So those funds will not be available for any of these projects once we free up that loan. 1/3 comes from the operating fund. However, that operating fund, it's about $600,000 a year, will then go to pay off the building loan for 5 years after that. So in reality, there will not be any additional funds coming available after we pay off the 2013 loan.
I think maybe, President Underhill, maybe what you're thinking are some of the loans or bonds that we had for expansion. Is that correct, Jeff, that are going to mature, that we're going to come off the books that provide some flexibility?
Yes, and that's what I was referring to. Those bonds were refinanced with the 2013 loan. And again, that loan, the loan is being paid for by a combination of expansion funds and operating funds. 1/3 operating fund, 2/3 expansion fund. Now, the loan that we took out for the R&R program, that's a 7-year loan. And the annual debt service is included in this analysis, but after, I think it's 2020-21, we will no longer have to pay debt service on that loan, and then the funds will become available for projects.
And the use of the expansion fund to pay the debt on this project, that allows us, in our repayment, we're actually repaying our fund, correct?
The expansion funds are their only source of revenue are connection fees. So once we pay off those loans out of the expansion funds, whatever cash balance is left over is available for expansion-related projects only, not for R&R projects.
Okay.
That was we just to, if I'm remembering this correctly, we've refinanced our bonds throughout the last decade. Every time the interest has gotten a little bit lower. I forget what we paid on this loan, but it was one of those things where all of a sudden private banks wanted to get into this because they were getting nothing off their interest. So they gave us a pretty terrific rate to refinance us, and it was another opportunity where we saved money for the district. We've done that 5 or 6 times over the course of just the last 10 years or so. So we've actually saved money by refinancing that. I'm sure we used Cameron Weiss to do that, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Jeff?
That is correct, Director Davidson. In fact, we got a 5-year rate at 1.58%.
Yeah,
which is
that's right.
phenomenal at that time and still is. So your board approved that refinancing package, and we saved significant amount of money.
I would just like to have some of that money back.
Have it back.
No, be able to use it. That's,
Well,
To
we are
use
going to
it
be
now.
we are going to be able to use it to pay off the next opportunities to pay off this building for it, and that's that was another thing that we tried to make short term, so we're trying not to have long term debt. You know, that we may not be able to continue that practice, but.
Okay, looking at the option B cash flow chart, you can see with suspension of the rate increase in September, we would be at after 3 years, we'd be at a balance of $882,140 on hand. So this would provide some measure of flexibility in having funds available to continue to do projects after the 3-year program. As well, there would be the rates would continue at the level that they're at now. This is what is contemplated even beyond that time period. So there would be a continuing funding available through the rates that we could use beyond 3 years. But we would have to, the question is how much would we have on hand to get started on work beginning with the 4th year. And lastly, the last 2 items with a $5 decrease would be at just over $4,000 in balance. So we would basically be waiting to do any projects until we had accrued additional funds to do them. And lastly, we would be with the 10%, we would be unable to perform all of the projects that we have on the list. And with a $400,000 shortfall. There's one other consideration as well that we haven't spoken about, but given our track record and our strong desire to get as much grant funding as we possibly can, that there's a measure of what happens on rates that affects that, because one, we have existing obligations under loans and grants, and our ability to provide on the loan side to provide the debt service requirements, having the sufficient revenues to cover the expenses of the debt. We have commitments, legal commitments on that. So on that side, we have to make sure that we keep revenues at a